When my son stopped visiting after he got rich, I didn't complain. I just waited. The phone calls slowed, first once a week, then once a month, then every other month if I was lucky. Then birthdays became texts, short ones. "Happy birthday, Dad, swamped at work, talk soon." I told myself he was busy, building a future I'd once dreamed for him, a future I'd worked double shifts to make possible. But when he stopped coming home altogether, when the holidays passed without him, when I realized I was learning about his life through photos posted online by people I'd never met, I understood something painful and true. I hadn't lost my son overnight. I'd been losing him for years, dollar by dollar, promotion by promotion, sacrifice by sacrifice. And the worst part wasn't the absence. It was realizing that somewhere along the way, in his new world of marble lobbies and business lunches, I'd become an embarrassment, a reminder of where he came from, a place he no longer wanted anyone to know about. I'm not the kind of man who makes a scene, never have been. I grew up in a time when you bore your pain quietly, when you didn't air your grievances to strangers or beg for affection from people who should give it freely. My father taught me that dignity isn't about what you have, it's about what you refuse to lose. So I didn't call him crying, didn't guilt him or make demands. I just stepped back, gave him the space he seemed to want, maybe needed. I kept living my life in the same small house where I'd raised him, where his growth marks still lined the doorframe in the kitchen, where his little league trophies collected dust on a shelf he'd once been so proud of. The house felt bigger with him gone, quieter. I'd walk past his old bedroom. I never changed it, never turned it into an office or storage like my neighbor suggested, and I'd remember the boy who used to run in with scraped knees and big dreams. "Dad, I'm gonna be somebody someday," he'd say, eyes bright with possibility. "I'm gonna make you proud." And I'd ruffle his hair and tell him he already made me proud just by being himself. But somewhere between that boy and the man in the expensive suits, something got lost, or maybe buried, under ambition, under new friends who measured worth in square footage and stock portfolios, under a life that looked perfect in photographs but had no room for the man who'd given everything to make it possible. The distance grew in ways I didn't fully understand at first. The phone calls that did come felt scripted, like he was checking a box on a to-do list. "How are you, Dad?" he'd ask, but I could hear him typing in the background, distracted, already halfway into his next meeting. "I'm good, son," I'd say, even when I wasn't, because what was the point of honesty when someone wasn't really listening? I'd ask about his life, his work, whether he was eating well, sleeping enough, the questions fathers ask, and he'd give me headlines, never stories. "Business is great, just closed a major deal, really busy, always busy, too busy to visit, too busy to call more than once a month, too busy to remember that I existed outside of his obligation to check in." I tried to bridge the gap. God knows I tried. I'd send him texts about small things, a bird's nest I found in the backyard, a funny thing the grocery store clerk said, the tomatoes coming in nicely that summer. Simple things from a simple life. Sometimes he'd respond with a thumbs-up emoji. Sometimes nothing at all. I learned not to expect more. Learned to find the small joy in just knowing he was out there, alive and well, even if I wasn't part of that wellness anymore. But knowing doesn't fill the silence at the dinner table, doesn't make holidays less empty, doesn't stop you from reaching for the phone 10 times a day and then setting it back down because you don't want to be the needy father, the burden, the reminder of a world he'd worked so hard to rise above. Then came the invitation, not a call, not a personal message, a group email, professionally formatted with his company logo at the top. "You're invited to celebrate Mitchell Harrison's promotion to senior vice president. My son, my Michael, now Mitchell." I sat there staring at that email for a long time, reading between the lines of what it really said. I'm someone important now. Important enough that even inviting my father requires corporate formatting. There was a +1 option. A suggested dress code, business formal. A note about valet parking. I looked down at my work boots, still dusty from the hardware store where I'd picked up supplies to fix Mrs. Chen's porch railing. She couldn't afford a handyman and I had time. That's the kind of wealth I had: time. and hands that still knew how to build things, fix things, make things right. I didn't go to the party. I told myself it was because I didn't have the right clothes, didn't know anyone who'd be there, would feel out of place among his colleagues in their practiced small talk. But the truth was simpler and harder. I didn't go because I wasn't really invited, not in any way that mattered. I was a box to check, an obligation to fulfill. Yes, my father was invited, past tense. Invited but not wanted, not really. So I stayed home that night, watched a game on TV, and told myself it was fine. He was living his dream. Wasn't that what I'd wanted for him all along? But something shifted in me that night, not anger. I never felt angry at him, not really, more like resignation, a quiet acceptance that I'd done my job as a father. I'd raised him, supported him, pushed him toward opportunities I'd never had. And now he was there at the top, and there wasn't room for me in that picture. It wasn't personal, I told myself. It was just how things worked. People moved up, moved on, moved away from where they started. It was natural, evolution, progress. I should be happy for him, and I was. Somewhere under the loneliness, under the ache of being forgotten, I was proud. He'd made something of himself. That had to be enough. The seasons changed. Fall came with its dying colors, winter with its long nights. I kept busy. Fixed things around the neighborhood for folks who needed help. Volunteered at the community center teaching woodworking to kids whose fathers worked 3 jobs and didn't have time. Found comfort in routine, in simplicity, in the kind of wealth that doesn't show up in bank accounts, but in the way Mrs. Chen brings me soup when I'm sick, or the way the teenagers I taught still wave when they see me at the store. I built a life that didn't need my son in it to feel complete. Not because I didn't want him there, God. I wanted him there every single day. But because waiting for someone to remember you exist is no way to live. I thought about him often. Wondered if he was happy in that big life of his. Wondered if success tasted as sweet as he'd imagined, or if sometimes, in quiet moments, he felt the same emptiness I did. If he ever drove past our old neighborhood and remembered the man who used to take him fishing at dawn, who taught him to change a tire, who sat up with him through nightmares and homework and heartbreaks. But those were just thoughts, prayers thrown into the void. I didn't call, didn't reach out. I'd learned that love sometimes means giving people the space to realize what they've lost, even if they never do. Then one Tuesday in March, the phone rang at 11 at night. I was already in bed, reading a worn paperback Western I'd read a dozen times before. The number wasn't saved in my phone anymore. I'd deleted it months ago in a moment of acceptance, but I knew it immediately. The way you know your own heartbeat. I stared at it for 3 rings, wondering what emergency would prompt a call this late. Maybe he'd gotten married and was calling to tell me after the fact. Maybe a courtesy notification that I'd become a grandfather. Maybe nothing at all. Maybe a pocket dial. I answered on the 4th ring, hello. Silence, then breathing. Then a voice I barely recognized, small, stripped of all that corporate confidence, shaking slightly. Dad. Just that, just my name, or my title. The word he hadn't really used in years. Always hey or nothing at all when he called. But now Dad, said like a question. Like he wasn't sure he still had the right to call me that. Michael, I said, because that's who he'd always be to me. Not Mitchell, not VP, just Michael, my son. He stopped, started again. I didn't know who else to call. Something in my chest cracked open, not with joy, with something more complicated, relief that he'd called, sadness that it had come to this, fear of what this might be. What's wrong, son? Another long pause. In the background I heard traffic. He was outside somewhere, alone. Everything, he finally said, and his voice broke on the word. Dad, everything's wrong, and I need help, I need. He couldn't finish. Where are you? I was already getting out of bed, reaching for my jeans. I'm in the city, I can't go home right now. The press there. Dad, it's bad, it's really bad. My business partner, we're under investigation, fraud charges. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know what he was doing with the accounts, but my name is on everything and the lawyers say. He was talking fast now, words tumbling over each other. I lost everything today. The company, my savings, they froze my assets. Sarah left. She took the kids to her mother's. Says she can't be associated with me right now. It'll hurt her career. Everyone's gone. Everyone. And I'm standing outside a hotel I can't afford and I needed to hear your voice. I closed my eyes, felt the weight of it, the kind of collapse that happens when you build everything on someone else's foundation and they pull it out from under you. When the people you thought loved you scatter like leaves the moment the wind changes direction. When you realize that the life you'd constructed, beautiful as it looked from the outside, had no roots, nothing real holding it together. Come home, Michael. Dad, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm telling, come home. Another silence, then so quietly I almost missed it. Okay. I gave him the address he already knew but seemed to have forgotten. Told him I'd leave the porch light on. Hung up and sat there in the dark for a long moment, feeling things I didn't have names for, not satisfaction. I'd never wanted this for him. Never wanted to be proven right that his new world was built on sand. But maybe something like recognition. That some truths take losing everything to learn. That sometimes people need to fall before they remember how to stand on solid ground. I went downstairs and made up the couch. The old brown one I'd bought at a yard sale 20 years ago. The one he'd called an eyesore when he visited that last time, suggesting I buy something more modern, more presentable. I put out fresh sheets and a pillow, turned on the lamp, started coffee even though it was nearly midnight. Then I sat in the kitchen and waited. He arrived just after 1 in the morning. I heard the car pull up, not the luxury sedan I'd seen in photos, but something older, probably rented. Heard his footsteps on the porch, slow and heavy. He didn't knock, just stood there. I could see his shadow through the frosted glass, this man who'd once been so sure of everything, now uncertain even of whether he could open his father's door. I opened it for him, and the man standing there wasn't the polished executive I'd seen in photos. This was someone stripped down to essence. Expensive suit wrinkled and stained, face unshaven, eyes red-rimmed and lost. He was carrying a single suitcase and a briefcase, and something about the briefcase made me sad, still clinging to the symbols of who he'd been even as it all crumbled. "Hey, Dad," he said, and then his face crumpled and he was crying. Not the way men cry in movies. The way they cry when they think no one's watching. Ugly and honest and broken. I didn't say anything. Just pulled him inside, took his bags, and wrapped my arms around him the way I had when he was small and the world seemed too big and scary. He was taller than me now, broader, but in that moment he fit back into the shape of my son. And he sobbed into my shoulder like his heart was breaking. Maybe it was. Maybe it needed to. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "God, Dad, I'm so sorry for everything, for disappearing, for being ashamed of you, for thinking I was better than. I'm so sorry." "I know, son, I know it's okay. You're home now." We stood there in the doorway for a long time until his breathing slowed and the shaking stopped. Until he could stand on his own again, even if just barely. Then I guided him to the kitchen, poured him coffee, and let him talk. And he did. Everything came spilling out. The partner who'd betrayed him, the money that was never really his, the friends who vanished overnight, the wife who'd loved his success more than she'd loved him, the kids being kept from him, the lawyers who couldn't promise anything, the media painting him as a criminal, the complete, total collapse of everything he'd built his identity on. I listened, didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions or platitudes. Just listened the way I'd wished someone would listen to me all those years. And when he finally ran out of words, when he sat there staring into his coffee cup like it might hold answers, I spoke. "You'll stay here as long as you need to. We'll figure this out. One day at a time, but Michael, I need you to understand something." I waited until he looked at me. "You didn't lose everything today. You lost things. Money, position, people who were never really yours to begin with. But you didn't lose everything. You still have yourself. You still have the chance to become the man you're supposed to be instead of the man you thought you should be. And you still have me. You never stopped having me, even when you forgot I existed." His eyes filled again. "I don't deserve." "Probably not," I said, not unkindly. But love isn't about deserving, it's about staying. And I stayed. So now you're going to stay too, not because you need a place to crash, but because maybe, finally, you're ready to come home for real. He nodded, unable to speak, and I showed him to the couch, gave him privacy to fall apart or pull himself together, whatever he needed to do, went back upstairs and lay in bed listening to the old house settle around us. Two men under one roof again, father and son, back where we started but different now, broken in ways that might finally let us heal. The next morning I woke to find him already up, sitting at the kitchen table in his wrinkled dress shirt and suit pants, looking out the window at the small backyard. He looked lost, like a man who'd woken up in a foreign country and didn't speak the language. I made breakfast, eggs and toast, simple things, and set a plate in front of him without ceremony. "Thank you," he said quietly, then looking around. "The house looks good, you kept it up." "I keep a lot of things up, it's what I do." We ate in silence, not uncomfortable exactly, but heavy with all the years between us. Finally he said, "I need to make some calls, try to figure out my legal situation, see if I can." "After breakfast," I said. "The world can wait 30 minutes." He looked at me like I'd spoken a revelation, and maybe I had. Maybe in his world everything was urgent, every moment accounted for, every silence filled with productivity. But in mine, breakfast came first, sitting together came first, being human came first. That's how the days began. Small rhythms, breakfast together, him on the phone with lawyers, me doing odd jobs around the house or the neighborhood. Lunch, more calls, more news, all of it bad. Dinner together where I'd try to get him to talk about something other than his legal troubles. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes we just sit in comfortable silence, the TV on low, two men learning how to be in each other's presence again. He slept on that couch for 3 weeks, never complained. Started helping around the house without being asked, doing dishes, fixing the leaky faucet I'd been meaning to get to, mowing the lawn. I'd watch him from the window sometimes, this man in borrowed work clothes pushing an old manual mower, and I'd see glimpses of the boy he'd been. The one who'd help me wash the car on Saturdays. The one who'd hold the flashlight when I fixed things in the dark. The one I'd lost to success. The legal situation was worse than he'd initially thought. His partner had used their company to funnel money through shell corporations, and while Michael hadn't been involved, proving that would take time and money he didn't have. The media loved the story, young hotshot executive caught in fraud scheme. His face was all over the news. Every article included that photo from his promotion party, the one where he looked so confident and successful. They loved showing the before. Nobody cared about the after. His wife filed for divorce, sent papers through a lawyer, wouldn't let him see the kids, said it was traumatic for them to see him like this. That hurt him more than anything else. He'd lie on the couch at night and I'd hear him crying quietly, trying not to wake me. But I'd always been a light sleeper. Comes with being a parent. You never really stop listening for your child's pain. One Saturday morning about a month in, I found him in the garage. He'd been going through old boxes, things I'd stored from when he was young. He was holding his little league glove, the leather cracked and stiff with age, and he was crying again. But different this time. Not the desperate sobbing of that first night. Something quieter, more like mourning. "I remember the day you bought me this," he said when he noticed me. "I thought it was the most expensive thing in the world. I was so careful with it, oiled it every week like you showed me." "You were a good player," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Could have gone further if you'd stuck with it." "I stuck with a lot of wrong things." He set the glove down carefully like it was sacred. "Dad, I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen, okay? Not forgive me, not tell me it's okay, just listen." I nodded. "When I got that first big promotion, when I started making real money, I was embarrassed by you, by this house, by the neighborhood. I'd tell people my father was retired, never mention what you actually did. When they'd ask where I grew up, I'd be vague, make it sound better than it was. Not because it was bad, it wasn't bad, but because it didn't fit the story I was telling about myself. Self-made man, rose from nothing. But that wasn't true. I rose from you. from your sacrifices. From double shifts and second-hand clothes, and you eating less so I could eat more. From love I didn't appreciate because I was too busy being ashamed of where it came from. He looked at me then, really looked at me. I stopped visiting because every time I came here I felt guilty. Guilty that I had so much and you had so little. Guilty that I'd used everything you gave me as a stepping stone and then just stepped away. It was easier not to come, easier not to think about it, easier to tell myself you were fine, you didn't need me, you probably preferred your quiet life. But that was all bullshit. I abandoned you. And the worst part is you didn't even fight for me, you just let me go. What else could I do? I asked quietly. Love isn't about holding on so tight you hurt the person you're holding. Sometimes it's about opening your hands and trusting they'll come back when they're ready. But what if I'd never come back? What if I just stayed gone? I smiled sadly. Then I would have lived with that, would have hurt, but I would have survived. Because your life, Michael, your choices, your path, those were never mine to control. I could only control myself. And I chose to love you whether you were here or not, whether you remembered me or not. That's what parents do. He broke down again and I let him. Sometimes crying is the only language grief knows. When he finally pulled himself together, he said, I want to make things right. I don't know how, but I want to try. Not because I'm stuck here, not because I lost everything, because I finally see what I had and what I threw away. And I'm so sorry. Then stop apologizing, I said, and start living different, be present, be honest. Be the man I always knew you could be, not the one you thought you should be. That's how you make things right. Not with grand gestures, with showing up, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. He nodded, wiping his face. Can I stay a while longer? I mean, I know I need to figure out my own place eventually, but stay as long as you need to, son. This is your home, always has been, always will be. Something changed after that conversation. He stopped treating my house like a temporary shelter and started treating it like home, started cooking dinners, started suggesting we watch movies together, started asking about my life, my friends, my days, really asking, really listening, started coming with me when I did repairs for neighbors. Mrs. Chen especially loved him. Your boy has a good heart, she told me in Mandarin, thinking he couldn't understand. You raised him right. He just forgot for a while. The legal case dragged on, but slowly things started clearing. Evidence emerged that Michael had been deliberately kept out of the loop on the fraud. Character witnesses came forward, people I didn't even know he'd helped over the years. Small kindnesses he'd done without telling anyone. Maybe he hadn't been entirely lost to success after all. Maybe some of what I'd taught him had stayed rooted deeper than I'd known. His wife, Sarah, reached out eventually, not to reconcile, to negotiate. She wanted the house they'd bought together. He signed it over without argument, said he didn't want to fight, didn't want anything that would hurt the kids. She was surprised. Her lawyer was surprised. Everyone expected him to fight. But he'd learned something about letting go, about choosing peace over winning. He started seeing his kids again, just supervised visits at first, then longer stretches. He'd bring them to the house and they'd play in the backyard I'd kept up for grandchildren I'd never met. I taught them to plant tomatoes, showed them how to use basic tools, told them stories about their father when he was their age. And I watched Michael watch them, saw the man he was becoming reflected in his children's eyes, saw him learning to be present, to value time over money, to understand that legacy isn't what you leave behind in bank accounts, but in memories, in lessons, in love that lasts after you're gone. 6 months after that midnight phone call, we were sitting on the porch at sunset. He'd just gotten word that the charges were being dropped. His name cleared. He was free. And I waited for him to tell me he was leaving, moving on, getting back to his life. Instead, he said, I've been thinking. I could get another corporate job, probably rebuild everything I lost. But I don't want to. I've been helping you with repairs and working with the community center kids, and I think I want to do that. Really do it. Maybe start a nonprofit teaching practical skills to at-risk youth. Use my business experience for something that matters. I don't know if it'll work, but for the first time in years, I'm excited about something that isn't about profit margins. I felt pride bloom in my chest, the kind that comes from watching someone finally become themselves. That sounds good, son. I'll need to find my own place, though. Get out of your hair. Or, I said slowly, you could stay, not forever, but until you're really steady. And even then, maybe just stay anyway. House is big enough for two, and I missed having you around. He looked at me, eyes shining. Yeah. Yeah. We sat there as the sun went down, father and son, the way we used to when he was small. And I thought about the journey we'd taken, how he'd had to lose everything to find what mattered, how I'd had to let him go to give him space to come back, how sometimes love looks like silence and patience and waiting with the porch light on. Dad, he said as the first stars appeared. Yeah. When you said you just waited after I stopped visiting, were you angry? Did you want to, I don't know, punish me? I thought about it, about those lonely nights, those empty holidays, those unanswered calls. No, I said honestly. I was sad, hurt, lonely sometimes, but angry, no, because I understood something you didn't yet, that the world you were chasing would either fulfill you or fail you, but either way, you'd need a home to come back to. And I wanted to make sure that home still existed, that the door was still open, that someone still remembered who you were before you became who you thought you should be. That must have taken a lot of strength. Not strength, love. They look similar, but they feel different. Strength is about what you can endure. Love is about what you choose to keep alive even when it hurts. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm going to visit every Sunday, even after I move out, every Sunday dinner together. No excuses, no work emergencies, no being too busy, just us, if that's okay. That's more than okay, son. And he did, every Sunday, rain or shine, success or failure, he showed up, sometimes with the kids, sometimes alone, sometimes with stories of his nonprofit struggles, sometimes just to sit in comfortable silence. But he showed up. That's the thing about coming home. The real journey isn't the leaving or even the returning. It's the showing up afterward, the choosing to stay connected even when it would be easier to drift away. The remembering that some relationships aren't transactions or obligations but foundations, the ground you stand on when everything else falls away. People sometimes ask me if I'm proud of my son, if I ever think about those years he was gone and feel resentful. And I tell them the truth. I'm proud of who he became after he fell, proud of his humility, his authenticity, his choice to build a life based on meaning instead of appearance. The years he was gone were painful, yes, but they were also necessary. Some people need to climb the mountain to realize the view from the top isn't as beautiful as the valley where they started. Some people need to chase gold to understand they were holding wealth the whole time. It just didn't shine. When my son stopped visiting after he got rich, I didn't complain. I just waited. Because I knew something he'd have to learn the hard way. That houses aren't homes, that success isn't the same as significance, and that the people who love you unconditionally aren't holding you back. They're holding space for who you really are, underneath all the ambition and fear and need to prove yourself. He came back not because he lost everything, but because losing everything finally let him see what he'd had all along. A father who never stopped being his father, a home that never stopped being his home, a love that never stopped waiting with the porch light on. And now, every Sunday, when I hear his car pull up, when I see him walking up that path with his kids or alone, when he opens the door and calls out, "Hey, Dad," I'm reminded that some journeys take you far away just to bring you home. That sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the freedom to leave and the assurance they can always return. That's the real wealth, the kind that doesn't crash or fade or depend on markets and success. It's the wealth of presence, of forgiveness, of second chances, of knowing that no matter how far you fall or how lost you get, someone left the light on, someone waited. I'm just glad I was patient enough to be that someone.